Hey guys, I'm Phil Town from Real One Investing, and today I want to talk to you about President Biden's 100-day plan and what that might mean for investors. So as you guys all know, a new president is in office. You've got to be living under a rock, right? If you don't know that. So we can expect lots of changes. We've been seeing lots of changes immediately in the first 100-day part of this president's term. And this time around, this is coming on the heels of a pandemic relief, bills, policy overhauls, and so on. And President Biden wants to do all this with his 100-day plan. And he's signing executive orders like no one ever in history. So this is going to really have an effect on us as investors one way or another, I would think. So I recently created a video for my Real One students on this topic, but I think this is really important. So today what I'm going to do is share some of the highlights of that video with you guys right here. So let's roll that clip. I think Biden will continue to have sort of frosty relations with China in terms of their military expansion and their, you know, if you're Chinese, you're not thinking it's military expansion. What you're thinking is we're protecting our borders the way America does, right? America has a very strong view of any outside, that means Asian or European influences in the entire Southern Hemisphere. And China is basically looking at their part of the world something similarly. And I think the question is going to come down to, would we fight to defend Taiwan? If China decides Biden will not fight to defend Taiwan, then they'll probably in the next 4 years give it a shot, right? You've seen what they've done in Hong Kong. They tested the water, nobody did anything. All those students were out in the street with American flags, and Trump was not going to come to the rescue of Hong Kong. You can talk about it, you know, how wrong it is, and blah blah blah, but the Chinese are wondering if you're going to cause a military problem. So we'll see what happens with Taiwan. That should be rather interesting. We will see a very large stimulus coming down the road. Trump wanted one; he couldn't get it from the McConnell. And you can see why not. After McConnell had his say yesterday or 2 days ago, quite clear about what he thought about Donald Trump, and Trump came back and allowed us to understand what he thought about McConnell. So Biden now has the reins. He's got a Senate, and he's got Republican senators who will approve of this, to get a big stimulus out there and really help these businesses and these employees who have been just unfairly crushed by a combination of COVID and the reaction of some mayors, some states to shutting down. Right, in some places they're very strong on shutting down. Other places not so much. So we're going to see, I think, more and more of the U.S. open up. For nobody knows why, but COVID is falling off in America quite strongly, and it could be that we've hit that herd immunity. We don't know, but certainly this isn't summertime, so it's not that, that the weather got better, but it's really dropping off for no good reason, and it could be herd immunity time. They think that a lot more people have gotten COVID than we ever imagined. Something in the neighborhood of 4 to 1, and we've had over 30 million get it, I think. So they're estimating maybe 120 million people have gotten COVID, maybe more, maybe 150 million, plus they've got 30 to 50 million people have been vaccinated. And, they think that herd immunity is somewhere between 40 and 70%. So we're over 40 and approaching 70, depending on how you look at the numbers. So wouldn't that be something, right? Give Trump a big gold star for making that happen, and for which he'll get exactly no credit. It's quite funny. So I think we'll see a big stimulus right on top of COVID slowing down dramatically, and that is going to mean faster employment growth and higher income across the board. Because of the combination of these two things, we're going to see a much stronger economy. We'll also see much more debt. Corporations are going to benefit from low interest rates staying low, and I don't see any. Obviously, you guys know that the Federal Reserve promised it wouldn't raise them until after 2023. What it may do is lower them even more. And there was an article today about just questioning what would it be like to see negative interest rates from the Treasury. Not impossible. If they don't see stimulus coming through these a $2 trillion, really $2 trillion being helicoptered into the American economy. And this is just printing money straight up. If you didn't know this, by the way, Trump printed 35% of all the money ever printed in the history of the country got printed during his administration, actually during the last year or so. And so this isn't going to slow the Democrats down any, if that's what the Republicans are willing to do. So you're going to see at least $2 trillion come out there, and that's going to jack things. And it's very hard to imagine the stock market crashing while this sort of intensive stimulus is going on. If they're continuing to lower interest rates, a great number of people who invest in the stock market truly believe that there's some sort of permanent relationship between the stock market and interest rates. So if interest rates are at 6%, you need the stock market to be doing, 10 or 11%, 12% to make sense out of being in the stock market. If interest rates are at 0%, then what should the stock market premium be? And the answer is maybe 5%. Well, imagine, you guys all know how we do our margin of safety analysis using a 15% discount rate. Imagine what would happen to the valuations of all these businesses if you plugged in a 5% discount rate and reflected just a 5% gap above a zero interest rate. So that would obviously triple the value you could put on every company out there. And so if we look at Boeing and said, oh, this is a $400 company, it would become a $1,200 a share company. And then the sky's the limit. I mean, Boeing's selling for $200, you could keep buying it. Or in any other company, you can just keep buying it because it hasn't reached its, discount value. That's exactly why we don't change that thing at all. We just don't change it because you end up with absurdities like that. But here's the bigger absurdity, is that the stock market is now priced at a 2% cap rate or a 2% yield, which means it's exactly 1% higher than the 10-year T-bill, not 5% higher or 6% higher. So what has happened is the premium for risk has declined so dramatically over the last 2 or 3 years because of low interest rates, meaning bonds are just hopeless. They don't pay you anything hardly. And where can you put your money where it's reasonably liquid? You can put it into real estate and maybe you're going to get a good deal. But I mean, real estate's expensive everywhere, which means you maybe get a 4% cap rate in real estate, maybe a 2% cap rate in Vancouver, or certain parts of Los Angeles or New York. Well, maybe not New York anymore. But you end up with very few places to put the money. And so you've got this chase toward yield. Well, what happens, of course, is that as more people try to chase yield, the yield itself lowers because more money is chasing it, right? So if you're lending money and you got more and more people who want to borrow from you, you can say, well, I'm gonna just charge you a fortune. If I got a ton of people want to borrow, I'm gonna raise my rates. Nobody wants to borrow. I can lower them, lower before I attract somebody that's going to give me some money. So you got a yield issue that's going on out there that's really, really something. Right now we've got bonds at 1 and the stock market at 2. This is 1999 time. This is where we were in 1929 kinds of time. So there's a lot of reasons to be pretty sketchy about where we're going here in terms of the stock market. Some of the other things that Biden administration is likely to do is open up immigration more. I talked about H-1B visas, but we'll also see a growing refugee problem at the border as more and more refugees realize that the United States is going to allow them to come in while we adjudicate their case, and we're going to let them go inside the United States while we figure it out, and then hope that they'll come in for a judicial hearing 2 years later or 3 years later. And that's very, very attractive. If you're poor and you live in Guatemala in a town that's controlled by lethal gangs, taking a long walk to the border with your children looks like a life-saving event. And under Biden, there is a very big heart for this kind of thing. Under Trump,
It was like, look, we understand you got problems. You should fix them in your own country. So we're going to see a lot more refugees coming in until it becomes a crisis again. That's just the nature of that kind of thing. It's its own kind of bubble, right? The first one's in, good. And then the more, and then, oh, wait a second. And even Biden's going to draw a line and finally have some enforcement at the border, I would suspect. In the environment, we're going to see a lot of money get pushed into subsidies toward clean energy. No question about that. Biden's agenda is a clean energy, net zero CO2 by 2050, and they want to put a lot of effort into making that happen. One of the things that people don't realize, I think, is that automobiles only produce about 7% of the problem, of the pollution that creates the problem. About 7% is automobiles. Trucks. Now, this is not trucks, right? This is just passenger vehicles, which means that passenger vehicles go electric, it's not going to have a big effect. And the reason is because electricity that they put into your battery isn't carbon zero. It comes from the same sources as the energy grid, which is still 30% coal. And between coal and natural gas, that's the vast majority of it. So ironically, there may be, going electric vehicles may be like a gain of 1 or 2% or something net on CO2 emissions. On the other hand, trucks all around town, those short delivery trucks, the big semis out on the freeway, railroad trains, all of that stuff is a heavy duty polluter. Airplanes, all of that stuff, heavy duty polluter, and not to mention energy that produces heat in your home. Now, the problem with net zero by 2050, as Texas and California have found out recently, is that having your main sources of energy be able to be overwhelmed can be extremely expensive, both in terms of dollars and in terms of the environment. I don't know if you guys are following along, but energy that was $4 a cubic foot, or whatever it is, 1 billion cubic feet or something for natural gas, went to, I think, 9,000 at one point last week. And that happens not because there's price gouging going on, it's because certain places have to have the energy at whatever price, and their boards know that, and so they have given permission to pay whatever you have to pay. And those different companies that have to have that kind of energy, and it's not just hospitals, it's critical infrastructure of all sorts, they have to have the energy, and so they have to pay up for it, including government installations. So the government's part of the problem of jacking up the energy that it is failed to produce. So yeah, Texas and California found out that in a big way. We'll have a lot more of that as we go toward this.
Now, I'd love to hear from you guys. What are your thoughts on President Biden's 100-day plan, and how do you think it will affect you as an investor? And just leave a comment below with your answer, and I'll be sure to follow up with you. And thanks for watching. Now go play. Hey, if you enjoyed this video and you think it was valuable for teaching you more about President Biden's 100-day plan and what it means for investors, hit the like button, and please share this with your friends. And if you want more investing content, subscribe to my channel, you guys. And don't forget to click the button on the screen for a free gift. We got some great stuff there. And thanks for watching.